The mist rolled over the village like a living thing, crawling across the ground and swallowing the outlines of huts and crooked trees. Dawn had not yet arrived, but the sky had begun its slow bleeding from black to blue. In the farthest corner of the village, where even the goats refused to wander, a girl lay curled beside an empty calabash bowl, her limbs folded tightly as if trying to become smaller than the soil itself. Her skin was mottled with old bruises, some yellowing with time, others purple and swollen like fresh fruit. Her dress, if it could be called that, was a torn length of fabric that clung to her like a discarded rag. She did not move. Her breath came in shallow bursts, fogging faintly in the morning air. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring through the mist as if expecting it to take shape. She did not know how long she had been lying there. She did not know the names of the stars that had wheeled above her through the night. She did not even know her own name. That was the cruelest thing. Each time she woke, the world pressed down on her with a weight she could not name. Her body ached in places she couldn't count, her back sore from the last blow, her fingers raw from scrubbing stones. But the pain was not what frightened her. It was the emptiness behind her eyes. The silence where memory should have lived. Who was she? Had she ever had a mother? A brother? A name whispered in love? No faces came when she searched. Only shadows. Yet something stirred in the wind. As the reeds rustled by the stream's edge, she heard it again. A sound so soft she might have imagined it, yet it always returned. A whisper. Not words, not exactly, but something like breath wrapped around syllables. It did not comfort her, nor did it scare her. Simply lingered. As if the wind remembered something she had forgotten. She sat up slowly, her spine protesting. The calabash beside her was empty, but she dipped it in the river anyway. The water barely stirred. When she lifted the bowl to her lips, her hands trembled. She drank in small, careful sips, watching her reflection ripple in the surface. A girl with hollow eyes. Mud crusted in her hair. Lips cracked from silence. The whisper returned, just behind her ear this time. She turned quickly but saw nothing, only mist and grass and the worn path that led back to the village. They would come for her soon. They always did. She placed the calabash down and stood, her knees weak beneath her. A name, she thought. Just one. Let me remember one name. But nothing came. Only the wind, and the soft whisper threading through it. The hut where she lived was no more than a skeleton of wood and smoke-stained thatch, tucked behind Duma's compound as if the village had tried to hide it out of shame. Each morning, before the first cock crowed, Duma's voice would pierce the silence like a thorn through bare feet. Thing. Rise. Before the sun shames your laziness. She would scramble up from her mat of dry reeds, her ribs pressing through her thin skin like carved bone. The chill clung to her, but there was no fire for her. Fire belonged to Duma, just like food, words, and rest. She dared not speak back. She had tried once years ago to ask why she was called Thing, and not by a name. Duma had backhanded her so hard she couldn't open her mouth for days. You don't have a name, Duma had hissed. You're not worthy of one. I found you in the dirt like a curse. Be grateful I didn't leave you for the vultures. That lie, the tale Duma repeated to justify every cruelty, became the only history she was allowed to know. That she was abandoned. That no one wanted her. That Duma, in her twisted generosity, took her in. The villagers did not question it. Duma was the widow of a hunter who had died under mysterious circumstances, and she carried herself with the kind of bitterness people feared. Her eyes were sharp, her voice louder than drums, and her hands fast. The girl was hers, they assumed. Or not quite hers, but hers to command at least. The girl cleaned, cooked, washed Duma's ragged clothes, fetched water until her feet cracked, and mended nets she would never use. She learned to move silently, to read Duma's moods by the angle of her shoulders or the stiffness of her lips. Even the children in the village learned to avert their eyes when she passed, her arms full of firewood, her back striped with welts. Years passed like smoke, shapeless, suffocating. She bled for the first time one cold harmattan morning, alone in the bush, and cried not out of fear but because she had no one to tell. No woman to guide her. No mother to smile and whisper, "You are becoming." She scrubbed the blood from her legs and returned to the compound before Duma could shout. And though her body changed, Duma did not. If anything, the beatings worsened. The woman seemed to take a twisted pride in keeping her broken. She fed her the scraps after her goats were fed, made her kneel for hours on millet husks, and forced her to sleep outside during the rainy season. The girl never screamed. She had learned not to. But there came a day when silence broke her more than any blow. It was during the yam harvest. The girl had risen early, tending to Duma's field before the sun rose. Her back ached, her palms blistered. As she bent to pull a stubborn root, Duma approached, furious about something. A chicken missing maybe, or a word she thought she'd heard. She didn't even explain. She just struck, and struck, and struck. Wood against skin. A pestle from the cooking hut, wielded like a club. The girl fell to her knees, blood pooling in her mouth. She gasped, tried to cry out, but nothing came. Her throat tightened, her lips trembled, but her voice was gone. Not hoarse. Not injured. Gone. As though it had been ripped out like a weed. For 3 days she could not utter a sound. Not even a breathless moan. Duma sneered, convinced it was just another weakness. "You're lucky," she snapped. No voice means no lies. But in the silence that followed, something changed. The girl began to hear whispers again, not just in the reeds or the wind, but in the spaces where her voice used to live. When she moved alone through the night to fetch water, the trees hummed with sounds. When she lay sleepless beneath the stars, her ears caught fragments. Fragments of words, half-remembered syllables that stirred something in her belly. One night, as she sat under the neem tree behind the compound, a breeze circled her. It felt warm, almost protective. The whisper came again. This time clearer. The name floated through her mind like a forgotten melody. Her heart skipped. She touched her throat, wanting to repeat it, to claim it. But still no sound passed her lips. Instead the wind grew still, as if waiting. The village healer, old Nana Ifika, walked by that night on her way to the sacred pool. She was a woman known for hearing what others could not, the cries of unborn babies, the songs of fevered spirits. She paused near the neem tree, peering into the darkness. Then she frowned, because she heard a name. Spoken not by the girl, not by any human tongue, but whispered through the leaves, clear as rain on iron. "Esh," the wind said again. Ifika turned slowly, her wrinkled hand clutching her staff. She looked at the girl, who sat silently, eyes wide and wet with unshed questions. "You didn't say that," the healer murmured. It wasn't a question. The girl only shook her head. Ifika narrowed her eyes. "But it was your name." The girl nodded once. From that night forward, the healer began watching her more closely. And Duma, though unaware of what had been spoken, seemed to sense that something in the girl was no longer as breakable as before. Her beatings continued, but her blows no longer rang as victorious. The girl's silence had changed. It no longer meant defeat. It had become something else entirely. A silence that listened. A silence that waited. The nights had always been cruel, but ever since her voice vanished and the name began to stir inside her, the dark had changed. It no longer felt like emptiness. It pulsed now like a living thing, a womb of sounds waiting to be born. The stars above the neem tree blinked slower, heavier, as if they too listened. She would lie awake long after Duma's snores died down, her body aching but her senses sharpened. Every leaf rustle, every shift in the wind felt like the breath of something trying to speak. Then, on the 7th night after the name had whispered through the trees, the voice came again. It was not a word, not entirely. It was a sensation. Like warm hands cupping her ears from inside her skull, like honey slipping through her ribs. She sat up fast, heart pounding. The moonlight shimmered across the courtyard, and the shadows danced around her like startled birds. Her hands gripped the edges of her mat. She looked around, breath hitching. No one. Nothing. But again the voice. "I remember." Her breath caught. It was not her own voice. Not the croaking fragments that sometimes rattled uselessly in her throat. This was different. It was female, but deeper than hers, and calmer, as though it came from beneath the soil. Her fingers pressed against her temples. This had to be madness. Duma had always said she was cursed, that her silence was punishment. Maybe her mind had finally broken. She tried to shut it out. Clutched her ears. Shoved her head under her arms. Bit her lip until it bled. Still the voice. "You are not forgotten. I remember what you cannot. I am what they tried to beat out of you." She whimpered, the sound trapped in her chest like a bird with clipped wings. Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head violently, mouthing the words, "No. No. I'm not her. I don't know that name." But a lullaby drifted into her ears. Soft, slow, unlike anything she had ever heard in Duma's hut. The rhythm was simple, yet impossibly familiar. She didn't know the words, but the melody slid into her body like a thread stitching something torn. Her fingers moved without command, touching her arms, swaying faintly to the beat. She wanted to hate it. Wanted to block it out. But her bones remembered it. Her skin knew this lullaby. It curled around her spine like a memory not born in the mind but in the marrow. She crawled out of the hut and pressed her back against the neem tree. The night was quiet except for the insects, yet the air pulsed with music no one else could hear. The voice hummed again and her lips trembled, almost moving in unison, like the echo of a forgotten prayer. They made you forget. But I didn't. The girl's fingers curled into fists. She wanted to shout, to scream at this ghost in her head, to demand it leave her alone, but no sound would come. Only tears. Only the fierce beat of a heart that suddenly feared something more than Duma's fists, the return of what had been buried. Who was she? Your name is your root. It cannot die. She crawled away from the tree, dragging herself toward the back fence of the compound. Her knees scraped against the dust, her arms shaking. She pushed herself through the hole in the fence and ran, barefoot and gasping, until she reached the edge of the fields. There, beneath the yawning sky, she collapsed. Her breath came in ragged gasps and for a moment she thought maybe she had outrun it. But the wind changed. It curled gently around her, brushing her cheeks like a mother's fingers. And then it sang. A different lullaby this time, one slower, sadder but still familiar. Her tears returned, spilling silently as her mouth formed shapes that almost matched the tune. She didn't know where the song came from, or how her lips moved without thought. But some part of her, something deep and aching, recognized it. This was not madness. It was memory. The voice was not a stranger. It was her. Or a part of her that had never been allowed to speak. She sat motionless until the stars shifted and the sky began to gray. The music faded slowly, like smoke drifting out of reach. She wanted to deny what had happened. To convince herself it was a dream born of loneliness and bruises. But as she walked back through the misty fields, barefoot and shaken, she knew one truth was now inescapable. Her name had not died. It had survived in silence. And it was calling her back. The first sign was the cassava. Duma's crops had always grown strong, fat with the sun and stubborn as her temper. But in the weeks after Esh began hearing the voice, the plants yellowed at the roots and curled like sick fingers. Duma blamed the dry winds, the lazy soil, the uselessness of the girl, but even the neighbors whispered that their own crops thrived while Duma's plot withered like it had been cursed. Then came the mirror. It hung crooked in Duma's room, the only thing in the house not dulled by smoke or dust. Duma stared into it often, tracing the lines of her face with bitterness, daring time to make her older. But one morning, after beating Esh for failing to heat the bathwater quickly enough, she left the girl curled and sobbing on the floor. Esh's silent cries echoed through the room, shaking her frail shoulders, tears falling onto the packed clay. The mirror cracked. A clean, jagged fracture split the glass down the middle, slicing Duma's reflection in half. She shrieked. "Witch!" she screamed, striking Esh with the wooden spoon until it snapped. "You bring demons into my house." Esh didn't move. Her breath came in short, silent shivers, but her eyes did not rise from the floor. She hadn't touched the mirror. Hadn't even looked at it. Still, Duma wrapped a red cloth around it, muttering curses and locked it away. But the whispers continued, not just inside Esh's head but around her. Children began to speak of strange things. They said when they passed the stream where Esh fetched water, they saw someone else reflected beside her. A girl made of light. Her face glowed like fireflies, and her hands shimmered as if woven from moonlight. When they blinked, she vanished. But the story spread. The elders grew tense. Mothers pulled their children away when Esh walked through the market. Some spat quietly on the ground as she passed. Others whispered prayers under their breath. Duma soaked it all in like wine. "I told you she was cursed," she said, lips curled. "Found her in the dust, didn't I? You all remember. Now she walks with ghosts." But one night, the fear turned into something worse. A child vanished. A girl named Lami, no older than 6, who had wandered out during dusk to chase a red butterfly. Her mother screamed until her throat cracked. Search parties combed the riverbanks. They found only a piece of torn cloth near the stream. The same stream where Esh often knelt, alone. Duma didn't hesitate. "She took her," she hissed. "The witch child. The cursed one." Esh stood frozen as Duma dragged her from the hut, her bony fingers twisted in the girl's collar. She didn't resist. Her legs moved because Duma pushed them. Her lips did not part. Her throat held silence like a locked gate. The villagers gathered. Someone brought rope. Another gathered dry wood. No one questioned it. The fear had thickened in the air like smoke before a storm. Esh was tied to the old baobab tree in the square, her hands behind her, her knees bent in submission. They piled the wood high. Her head lolled downward, but her eyes were dry. Even as the flame was lit. The torch hovered inches from the kindling. Then it sputtered. It coughed once, sparked, and died. Another tried. The fire hissed but would not catch. A third came forward. He dipped the torch in palm oil. Held it to the branches. Still nothing. The wood, dry and brittle, should have burned like paper. But it refused. The villagers murmured. Duma's eyes flicked in panic. Strike again, she screamed. She's tricking you. She's casting shadows. Burn her. But before anyone moved, it happened. A wind swept through the square. It was gentle yet undeniable. The kind that carries scent and song and memory. The flames flickered, not up but sideways like bowing. The ropes around Esh's wrists strained and creaked. Then came the whisper. Not from the girl. Not from the wind. From them. From every mouth gathered there. She remembers. The words fell like stones into a silent lake. One voice. One phrase. Spoken by many lips but not controlled by them. The villagers' eyes went wide. Some clutched their chests. Others dropped their torches. Duma stumbled backward, mouth moving, no sound escaping. Esh lifted her head. Her eyes met theirs, blank, unreadable. But something behind them burned. She remembers, the whisper said again, softer now, and the torches all extinguished at once. No one dared speak after that. The crowd dissolved slowly, as if waking from a dream they did not want to understand. Some ran. Others prayed. A few simply stared at the girl, still tied to the tree, lit by moonlight and the trembling hush of a name that refused to die. Duma didn't move. She stared at Esh like she'd never seen her before. Then, with a trembling hand, she turned and vanished into the dark. Esh remained at the tree until dawn. The ropes, loosened by no hand, slipped free. She stood, bones aching, legs weak. But her back was straight. And the shadows that had gathered around her did not vanish. They followed. They didn't untie her with mercy. By morning the square had emptied. The silence left behind felt heavier than the threats. No one came to offer food or water. No one looked her in the eyes. When she finally walked through the village gates, barefoot, dust on her face, lips chapped and dry, there was no resistance. Only quiet eyes watching from behind reed mats and broken doors. Esh didn't speak. Couldn't. The silence had become her cloak. But she walked. Out of the village. Into the unknown. Vanished. The path ahead was not marked, but her feet found it. The sun rose heavy, burning through the mist. She wandered deeper into the wilderness, past thorn trees and river gullies, past the carcass of a forgotten shrine. The hunger came first. Then the thirst. Then the ache of loneliness. Her body begged for rest, for food, for shade. But something inside her kept walking. Something that wasn't afraid. By the second night, her legs trembled. Her skin was scratched and bleeding. Her belly groaned and folded into itself. Still she walked. The voice returned when the moon was highest. It did not whisper this time. It spoke. Not to her, through her. Mikpo. The word slipped out as she passed a low shrub with thorny leaves. She stopped. The word had not come from her mind. It came from her mouth, though she had not moved her lips. The shrub rustled, almost bowing in the breeze. Her throat burned. Ache Ray. Her voice again as she stepped over a cluster of stones shaped like a claw. The word came with an image, a memory not her own, of a child laying pebbles in the same pattern, humming to herself. She stumbled backward. Her hand flew to her chest. Her heart galloped. What was this? The voice was her own, but deeper, older, and speaking things she had never learned. She turned in a circle. Nothing around her. Only wilderness and moonlight. You are not mad, the voice said. You are waking. She fell to her knees, clutching her head. What do you want from me? She mouthed, though no sound escaped. The voice answered. Not with demand, but with knowing. I am your name. She gasped, a dry, choking sound. The one they tried to burn. The one they tried to bury. I hid when you were broken. I wept when you forgot. But names are alive, Esh. They do not die when they are spoken with love. They die when they are silenced. And I refused. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The dust beneath her darkened. She fell forward onto her palms, her body shaking with exhaustion. The silence inside her cracked. The voice continued. You are more than the pain they gave you. You are not thing. You are not curse. You are not silence. You are Esh. The wind shifted. And as if drawn by something deep within the soil, her legs pulled her forward once again. She walked blindly now, through thickets and over rocky hills, down into a valley where the air felt different. Thicker. Older. The sun was rising behind her when she reached it. An ancient grove. Trees older than memory. Trunks wider than houses. Leaves black at the edges, glowing faintly green beneath the canopy. The air was sweet with rot and rain. She stumbled into the grove and collapsed. For a moment she thought she had died. But the ground cradled her. And the trees moved, not swaying, bowing. Their massive limbs leaned inward, curling as if embracing her. Leaves whispered overhead. A windless hush filled the space, thick with presence. She lay curled at the base of the oldest tree, her fingers sinking into moss, her breath ragged. "I have nothing," she whispered with what little voice remained. "I don't even have myself." "You have me," said the name. She sat up slowly, chest heaving. "Who am I?" she mouthed again, voice still a rasp. The grove answered. Not with words but with memory. Visions rose around her like fireflies. A cradle woven from river reeds. A woman singing a lullaby under a tree like this one. A little girl, herself, running barefoot across polished stone floors. A midwife's hand rough and trembling. Smoke. Screams. And then Duma carrying a bundle wrapped in goat hide, whispering, "No one will know. No one will remember." Esh clutched her stomach and rocked. It had all been stolen. Her mother. Her home. Her name. But not destroyed. Her name, Esh, had hidden in the roots of her soul, whispering back from the dark, waiting. You were not lost. You were covered. A gust of wind swept the grove. The moss rustled. The trees sang. Not with mouths, but with sound nonetheless. A chant rose, wordless but full. It came from within and around her. She rose to her feet, barely, and stepped to the center of the grove. "Say it again," she whispered. It echoed like thunder through her bones. The grove knew her. The wind knew her. And now, finally, she knew her. She placed her hand on the trunk of the oldest tree. The bark was warm. "Then I will speak," she said, her voice trembling. The first true word she had spoken in years. "My name is Esh. And I am not gone." The grove cradled her like a sleeping mother who had been waiting too long to hold her child. Esh woke with moss clinging to her skin and the scent of old wood in her breath. The light filtering through the trees had changed, golden now and thick with dust motes that floated like tiny spirits. She didn't know how long she had slept, only that she had awoken not as a girl but as something remembered. The voice inside her, her name, pulsed with purpose now. It was no longer just a whisper but a companion. It didn't speak constantly. It didn't need to. It knew when to guide and when to be silent. As she walked deeper into the grove, her bare feet sinking into damp soil, it showed her not where to go, but where she already belonged. Her steps led her to a clearing at the grove's heart. There, half swallowed by roots and time, stood a broken altar, carved from black stone, smooth and ancient. Symbols ran along its edges, spirals, stars, birds with wide eyes and outstretched wings. She felt the weight of its gaze before she touched it. But her hands rose anyway. The moment her fingertips brushed the stone, the carvings shivered. They did not glow. They did not hum. They shifted, as if the truth beneath the surface was rising to meet her. Images rippled across the altar's face. Not pictures, memories. Alive. Breathing. A palace bathed in golden cloth and firelight. A courtyard where musicians played drums as slender women twirled. A child, her unmistakably, laughing beside another little girl with bright eyes and braids threaded with beads. Zalika. The name came with the vision, heavy with both sweetness and betrayal. Esh gasped. The girl in the vision had looked at her with such fierce love. But in the next moment, flames erupted across the palace sky. Smoke rose. Screams filled the air. And in the chaos, someone ran, an older woman wrapped in midwife's cloth, carrying something bundled in red. Duma. Esh staggered back. Her chest heaved. Her name pulsed within her. You were born of blood and crown. Your name held the memory of land and breath and fire. Duma knew it. She feared it. The altar shifted again, revealing another moment. Duma crouched in a hut, her face younger, eyes wild. The bundle she carried stirred. A baby cried. Duma hissed, silence, and then looked down as though the wailing had said something more than sound. You'll forget. I'll make you forget, Duma said, not with rage but with terror. I'll beat it out of you if I have to. The altar darkened. The memory ended. Ish stood there swaying. Royal blood. She was never abandoned. Never worthless. Her name had not just been a word, it had been a danger. A threat to someone who stole her. A threat to whoever had set that fire. Her hands trembled and still they moved, tracing the altar's edge, pulling her deeper into knowing. Her name surged again and with it came motion. Her fingers dipped into a crack in the stone, drawing patterns she didn't recognize, yet her bones remembered them. Circles within circles. Marks of lineage. Her hands moved like dancers. Around her, the grove seemed to exhale. The trees stirred. A soft wind rose. Leaves floated down and spun gently in the air, spiraling around her. She did not speak the words. They spoke through her. I offer my breath to the ancestors who carried me. I pour my silence into the earth, that it may bloom into truth. The moss beneath her feet brightened. She knelt before the altar, hands pressed flat against its surface. I reclaim what was taken. I remember what was stolen. I am Esh, daughter of flame, blood of the crescent moon, bone of the valley trees. As the words ended, a light shimmered beneath the stone, faint, like dew-catching sunrise. Her heart slowed. She was not afraid. She had always wondered if she was nothing, a scrap of pity, a mistake that no one wanted. But now she knew she had been taken. Her name had survived it. And now so had she. Esh rose. Behind her the grove stood taller. Around her the trees did not just sway, they watched. Not like men. Not like Duma. But like guardians who had waited a long, long time for someone to return. Her hands, still tingling, pressed against her heart. The voice was quiet now, not because it had vanished, but because it no longer needed to prove itself. She walked out of the grove, the moss parting under her steps. As she passed the trees, they bowed again, not in worship but in recognition. Esh did not look back. The story she carried now was not one of pain alone. It was a story that lived in soil and stone. A story her name had never stopped telling. The wind arrived before she did. It swept through the village with an unnatural rhythm, warm and full of scent, not just of leaves and dust but of memory. It stirred the cooking fires before their time, knocked over empty calabashes, rustled the reeds on the rooftops as though whispering names long forgotten. Birds, not the common village crows but bright, long-tailed creatures from the deep woods, flew overhead in clusters, circling as if guiding something home. Children pointed. Women looked up from their pounding stones. The old men paused mid-dice. The whisper they had all tried to forget began to breathe again between their huts. Esh walked back into the village barefoot, her dress simple but untouched by dust, her face shadowed by the clouds gathering overhead. Her eyes were steady, and her silence was no longer emptiness. It was the pause before a song. The first to speak was the woman who sold palm oil at the square. "Is that her?" she whispered to no one in particular. "It cannot be," said the butcher's son. "She should be dead. They tried to burn her. But the fire hadn't taken her. Something else had. Truth. It had taken her into its mouth and carried her where the world couldn't reach. And now it was carrying her back. She passed the neem tree where they had tied her. The rope still lay there, brittle and half buried in dust. She did not stop. Her feet carried her to Duma's compound without hesitation. The wind moved faster now, swirling dust into the air until the villagers followed it, drawn by something they could not name. No one spoke. No one tried to stop her. She didn't need force. She had her name. Duma emerged from the hut's shadow with a scowl ready on her face, the same scowl that had bent Esh's back for years. But it froze when her eyes met the girl's. No, the woman's. Esh stood still, her eyes fixed on Duma, whose face had grown gaunt in the time since. Fear moved in her like a sickness, visible behind her lips. She took a step back. "You," she hissed. "You shouldn't have come back." Esh didn't answer. The voice did. It moved through her, not from her throat but through her very presence. It rang through the square, not loud but inescapable. "You took her. Not from the streets. Not from the dust. From fire. From blood. From her own mother's hands." Gasps filled the air. Villagers turned toward one another, eyes wide. Duma's skin blanched. "You burn the truth but names do not burn. You beat it but names do not bleed. You buried it but names grow roots." Duma shook her head. "No one would have believed it. I did what I had to. I saved her from that fire. You stole a crown and gave it chains. You saw power in her name and tried to make it nothing. Then came the visions. They rose like steam from the earth, hovering before the villagers' eyes. One by one each of them saw a truth not imagined, but remembered. The butcher saw Esh as a child being carried through flames. The palm oil seller saw Duma crouched behind a broken wall, muttering as she pressed herbs over a baby's sleeping mouth. The healer saw a line of royalty, their names carved in stone, and Esh's among them chiseled beside her mother's. Even the children saw. They saw a baby laughing beneath golden cloth. They saw a name, Esh, spoken in lullabies sung to moonlight and scented skin. The square fell into stunned silence. Esh still had not moved. Duma fell to her knees. Please, she begged. I raised her. I fed her. I gave her shelter when no one else would. You broke her, someone said. No, Duma cried. I tried to keep her hidden, yes, but I didn't mean harm. I thought I was protecting her. From those who killed her mother. From being hunted. But her voice cracked beneath the weight of truth. Lies bent beneath memory. I never knew she would remember. The voice returned, not angry, not triumphant. She already forgave you. Duma looked up, stunned. That is why you still breathe. Tears welled in the old woman's eyes. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Esh finally stepped forward. Her gaze lingered not on Duma, but on the others. Those who had watched her bleed, those who had turned away, those who had spat on her name without ever knowing it. She spoke, her voice steady, soft, but made of iron. I came not to punish. I came to speak. Not to be heard, but to be known. A hush fell. And then a single woman stepped forward, the weaver. She knelt and bowed her head. I see you now, she whispered. Then another came. I see you. I see you. I see you. The crowd bent, not in fear but in reverence. The sky above rumbled gently. The wind stilled. Esh turned from Duma and walked toward the neem tree once more, each step silent, but echoing with something more powerful than vengeance. She was not returning to reclaim what was stolen. She was returning to remind them what they had forgotten. Who she had always been. Asked ChatGPT. The summons arrived on wings. Not parchment. Not messengers. But birds, 3 white ibises that descended into the village square one dawn with feathers flecked in gold and eyes like memory. They landed before Esh and bowed their heads. No one spoke, but everyone knew. The capital had heard. The truth had reached the throne. Esh did not hurry. She did not dress herself in royal cloth or ask for an escort. She walked alone as she had always done, but now the earth shifted slightly to meet her steps, and the trees leaned just enough to shade her path. Where once her presence had been silence and shame, now it was ceremony. Still, she carried herself not with pride, but with purpose. The journey to the capital took 3 days. When she arrived, the guards at the gates lowered their spears without being asked. The gates, which had once been sealed to her blood, swung open. Inside, the palace of her earliest memories stood as she had glimpsed it in the visions, grand and sprawling, with sun-washed stone, pillars carved with the stories of those long gone. She walked those halls without needing direction. Her fingers brushed murals and doorways that her body remembered. Her breath caught at corners that once held laughter. In the central hall, the high council awaited her. Old men with silver rings, women with sashes made of woven fire silk. And at the center, the high matron herself, her eyes sharp, her back bent slightly under the weight of years. We have read the records, she said, rising. The truth was buried. But the stones kept it. She stepped forward and unfurled a scroll, not made of paper but bark soaked in oil and inked with iron root. She read aloud a name. Esh, daughter of Sariah the Beloved. Blood of the royal line. Flame-born. Unforgotten. The hall bowed as one. Then the matron spoke again. The throne is yours. The land remembers you. The law remembers you. But Esh shook her head. I do not come for a throne, she said, her voice gentle, clear and whole. I come to remember. Confusion flickered. Murmurs rippled. She stepped forward and lifted a pouch from around her neck. From it, she pulled a single reed pen carved from grove wood, and a flat slab of moonstone, the same stone she had carried from the altar in the grove. She held it up. I was silenced, she said, and forgotten. But my name found me. And it sang not just for me, but for all who are cast out, who are broken, who are made into ghosts while they still breathe. She turned to the great stone wall at the back of the hall, once a blank ceremonial slate. A place of tribute never used. She dipped the reed pen in a bowl of dark ink and approached. I do not wish to rule, she said. I wish to remember. She bent and carved the first name, not hers. It was Lami, the little girl who had gone missing. A child the village forgot too quickly. The ink burned into the stone, dark and permanent. Then she wrote another. A boy from the edge of the village who had drowned seasons ago with no mourning drum. Then another. And another. Names no one else remembered. Names that returned to her now, given by the wind, by the trees, by the voices that had no tongue but still lived. Each time she etched a name, the air warmed. The wall pulsed. Children from the capital began lining up. Mothers brought their babies. Old men whispered the names of siblings lost to war. The council stood in awe as Esh wrote without rest, without pause, letting the names move through her. She became something more than a girl, more than a survivor. She became a vessel. A keeper. She worked for days. Never tiring. Never questioning. Every name carved into the wall became part of a great woven song, humming through the stone halls like a low drumbeat. And at last, when no name remained in the wind, Esh stepped back. She looked at the empty space at the center of the wall. Her hand lifted the pen once more. This time it did not tremble. She wrote it slowly, carefully, each stroke steady as a heartbeat. As the final letter curved into place, the ink flared white, not fire but light. The wall shimmered, then glowed. Every name on it lit up as if waking, as if singing. Gasps echoed behind her. But Esh did not turn. She pressed her hand to her own name, not to claim it, but to give it back to the ones who had never been allowed to say it. I was made silent, she whispered, so I could learn to hear. I was made to forget so I could become the one who remembers. The room filled with a stillness so deep it felt like peace. And from that day forward the wall never dimmed. Because names, once truly spoken, never die. The sanctuary was hidden deep in the hills, far beyond the reach of cities or kings. No maps marked its place. No soldiers guarded its gates. But those who needed it found it, always. They came barefoot, hollow-eyed. Some walked alone, others were carried. Many had no names when they arrived. Only scars. Some bore lashes. Others silence. But all were children once claimed by forgetting. Esh greeted each one herself. She wore no crown. Only a robe the color of dusk and a necklace made of carved reeds. One for each name she had remembered, one for each voice that had returned. Her hair had grown long and gray in places, but her eyes had not dulled. They were still moonlit, the kind of eyes that had stared down fire and come back with something brighter. She no longer needed to say much. The children said that when she did speak, it sounded like two voices, one soft and human, the other older, echoing like wind through hollow trees. They never feared the echo. It was the sound of someone remembering for them when they couldn't. The sanctuary had no walls, only archways made of braided roots and flowering vines. The wind moved freely through it. The learning stones were worn smooth from tiny hands. And beside the garden, a great wall of names stretched wide, carved in light and ink, still glowing softly even now. Each morning, Esh sat among the children under the baobab. They sang together sometimes, songs with no known language but melodies that stirred ancient things. Other times she told stories, not of heroes or battles but of names. How names were seeds. How they hid when the storm came, then bloomed when the sun remembered them. The children didn't always understand. But they felt it. In their bones. One morning, under a rising mist, a child arrived at the sanctuary gate. She could not have been more than 6. Her arms were thin as river reeds. Her face had been beaten into stillness. Her clothes hung off her like forgotten fabric. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She only stood there, her eyes wide and waiting. The other children whispered among themselves, watching as Esh approached. Esh knelt slowly, eye to eye. The girl flinched but didn't step back. Esh's voice was gentle, low, filled with that echo the children spoke of. I don't need to know what they called you, she whispered. I know who you are. The girl blinked. Her lip trembled. Esh reached out and placed a hand on the child's chest, right where the heart beat wildly like a caged bird. There's something in there, she said. Something that's been whispering your name even while you slept. Even while you were hurt. Tears welled in the child's eyes. One fell, then another. She clutched Esh's wrist with tiny fingers. Esh's gaze didn't falter. Can you feel it? The girl nodded. Esh leaned closer. Then say it. Let it speak. The child's lips parted. A long silence passed. Then, a word. A name. One Esh had never heard before. Tiana. The moment it was spoken, the air around them changed. The vines on the archway trembled. The wind paused, then pushed forward, warm and full. The sanctuary wall, the glowing wall of names, pulsed with a new rhythm. Not loud, not violent. Just deep. Like a drumbeat rising from under the floor of the world. The other children gasped. One dropped her bowl. Another whispered, Did you feel that? Esh's eyes widened, not with fear but awe. She had remembered so many names. Names that had been nearly lost, buried by pain and cruelty. But this name had never been written, never spoken in the sanctuary before. Yet the very stones seemed to recognize it. Esh smiled. Tiana, she repeated. A name the world thought it had never heard, but the land knew it all along. She rose, gently guiding the girl by the hand toward the wall. The children followed silently. Together they approached the sacred surface. The wall was quiet now, waiting. Esh lifted her reed pen. But before she could write, the child reached up and touched the wall with her small hand. And the wall responded. It carved itself. Letter by letter, stroke by glowing stroke, the name appeared. Tiana. When it was complete, the wall lit up, not just with light but with sound. A low hum began to rise. A harmony. The name Esh had spoken all those years ago, her own name, pulsed once in recognition. Two names. Now in harmony. A song passed through the stones, through the earth, through the breath of every child standing there. Esh placed a hand on the wall beside the new name. Her voice was soft but all could hear. She will not be forgotten. The children nodded. And neither would Esh. Not because she ruled, but because she remembered, and because she had taught them to remember too. So that no silence could ever again steal what the earth had always known. And so, long after Esh's hands grew tired and her body leaned with age, the sanctuary remained, a place of names and echoes, of soft songs and healing winds. And when new children came, silent and broken, the others would kneel beside them and say, I don't need to know what they called you. We already know who you are.